Hello and welcome to the Buffering Podcast. I'm Christian from Erickson Films, joined today by my co-host Eric from Eric Moran Films, and our guest today is Taras from LateNightGaming. We're going to be talking about his channel, content creation in general, and hopefully it's going to be an exciting, entertaining episode as always for you guys, the viewers and listeners. But well, Taras, we should probably get it out of the way. You and I know each other. We are friends.
Yeah.
So that is how this podcast came to be. But you actually did a podcast with me about a year ago on my main channel where we talked a little bit about your channel and just like how you got into this whole thing and what you're doing now. So I just kind of wanted to open it by like just asking you, like, I guess like how you're feeling about your own content creation, your own channel at this point, after like all the time you put into it, all the success that you've been met with. Like, how do you feel about doing YouTube right now?
Pretty good. Obviously, like a lot of kind of like the momentum for my channel was formed from like trivia. I mean, in regards to like the global scale, it's not anything serious. It was mostly just like critiques and art style critiques of the Halo video game franchise. And the next Halo game seems to be correcting a lot of that stuff. So now I kind of look at my YouTube channel and it's just like, all these people are still here. Like, they're still here. They won't go away. So I just keep making videos on just my opinion on things and people stay. So I guess people like my opinions or enjoy my personality. So yeah, I feel pretty good about that. It's really heartwarming to see that people haven't just kind of left once all the big stuff is said and done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think there's like this idea that the best kind of channels are the ones where the content creator is just sort of being themselves and the audience follows. Like, I think that's where everyone like kind of wants to be with their channel, but it's cool that it seems like that would describe your experience because, as you mentioned, the sort of videos that originally helped launch you to becoming a larger channel are, at a point now where they're not necessarily necessary to make anymore, right? Because a lot of the stuff has been addressed by 343. Like, as far as Halo, for those of you guys who don't know, he is a Halo YouTuber, at least mainly. And from my understanding, your original videos that got larger were about the art style changes in Halo, correct?
Yeah, just, I mean, like anything, when a new developer or producer or artist, whatever, takes over the intellectual property of a different creative, there's going to be changes and stuff because you've got fresh minds coming to the table. And Halo changed and kind of morphed into something that was very different. Not bad, but different to the point where fans of the Halo franchise were feeling alienated by the changes. It was starting to not feel like the franchise that they fell in love with. So a lot of my videos were focused on like, here's what changed, here's what's off-putting to people, and stuff like that.
And then now, like, are you at a point where you feel like it's hard to come up with video topics because of the lack of, I guess, stuff going on with Halo right now that's like releasing? Does that cause a problem at all for you, or do you feel like it's generally something that you can figure out every week?
Some of it is definitely difficult, just because I don't like to just make videos, because every video I kind of turn into like this whole production. I write up a script, I try to do research, so I don't want to be wasting people's time with like a top 10 video or a let's play. I try to make sure that each video is educational, or at least, if not educational on the Halo franchise, maybe educational on why I feel the way that I do about a certain topic. And it's especially hard when it's something super trivial, because that's where I have to work extra hard, because it's like, listen, I'm probably the only person on planet Earth that cares about this tiny, tiny, insignificant thing. I've got to figure out how to make my opinion not come across as just pathetic.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's...
I'm kind of curious. So how do you, what do you, so like you were saying how like you're talking about these, that how you consider them kind of trivial things. How do you make, how do you create such engagement and make your audience care? Because when I was looking at your channel, there's a
Mhm.
lot, like each video, like you have really, like it's really good engagement and you really kind of fostered this community. So what do you like attribute that to?
Definitely editing
Okay.
is a really good, because like you can write up a script and stuff, but that can't just be it. It can't just be like flat. Like I've seen the term like video essay thrown around, and it's starting to
Okay.
have like negative connotations because there's a lot of like just weirdos who are vapid and have no personality, and they make their video essays on why this is dead or this was killed. And but it is kind of like that, where what you're doing is it's not just what you're writing. The visuals need to support that, the visual and the audio experience. So I spend a really long time editing things, fine tuning things. In fact, I've got a audio library of not just songs, but specific parts of the song, like the drum track strategically removed from it so that I can kind of layer all these different things together to kind of compose an emotional journey that accompanies what I'm saying, as well as the video footage.
How long does, because it sounds like you're putting a lot of thought into how you're editing these things. How long does it take to, I guess it probably will depend on the video, but how long does it take typically when it comes to scripting and editing,
Mhm.
and what's that kind of process like for you?
It's definitely a few days. It's usually
Okay.
so I like to listen to a lot of podcasts or kind of long form uh YouTube video stuff, like people just like voicing their opinion, because it like gets me into that headspace. And
Hmm.
usually when I'm inspired by something, I make a note on my phone with a link to where I found the inspiration. And then what I'll kind of do also sometimes is, so my dad had me writing at a very young age. When I was 10, he had me writing like 5 paragraph essays on things. I made a 5 paragraph essay at the age of 10 about like why Legos are so creative. So my dad was super into English, and so usually like sentences or openings to an essay are rattling around in my brain a lot. So I'll write like also a couple of things that I think could make a strong, powerful opening statement or whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of like finding inspiration for something, thinking about, okay, those are a couple of sentences that will definitely be in this script when I start writing it. And then I start mapping out what the video style will kind of be like. I think of like, okay, I'm probably going to use this track, this music track, this track. Uh, and then, yeah, so it's usually a couple days of doing a little bit of research on the topic, so I'm not going into it uneducated, capturing as much footage as I can, as well as trying to make the footage stylized. So I'm not just capturing straight up gameplay. I like to modify the visuals to make it look a little bit less gamey and a little bit more supportive of what I'm saying. As That's a little bit vague what I just said. So, as an example, I made a video on the shotguns of the Halo franchise. And because the focus needs to be on the shotguns, and Halo is a first person shooter, you've got all these like elements of your heads up display, like your ammo counter up here, your little motion tracker down here. So, I took down the heads up display. So, it's just the raw footage. I added a depth of field effect so you could kind of barely see what was going on. So the only thing in focus was that shotgun on the screen. Then, add a little bit of a per object motion blur effect, just so it's like a very filmic presentation of what I'm talking about.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
like, and in that sense, the creation of these videos, do you find every part of it fun, or is some of it where you're like just thinking about like, this is going to kind of take a lot of time, but I know it'll look really good in the end and I might not be enjoying it in the moment?
It's usually the it's usually the getting it going that's the hardest part,
Mm-hmm.
where I open up my editing software and I'm just staring at an empty timeline with no footage there, and I'm just like, Oh boy. And then obviously once I've got things going, I see lots of elements and notes that I'm making. It's like your brain enters that like just fog,
Hmm.
and 10 hours pass and you're done.
Yeah, no, like that's, I think that, so last week when we had our guest Max Mariner on, we were kind of talking about like that passion for talking about your interests, like kind of is what makes us similar as YouTubers, all of us. And like, I think
Mhm.
that also like a tolerance for putting in crazy hours to something and having it feel
Yeah.
fun is also part of it. Cause like, I feel the same way. Like, it's actually very, like, it's a very like meditative experience to like be behind the computer editing like all day, to the point where I feel good at the end, not like I do when I do my remote job for work where I feel terrible after like 6 or 8 hours.
I definitely feel a little bit sick after some of my videos that I make, especially the
Mhm.
long ones, and not because of the video. That stuff is all fun, but it's like as the hours go on, like my legs are cramping and stuff, and I'm aware of how unhealthy this is, staring at the computer screen for so long, not moving physically for so long, but I can't get away from it because my brain is in the zone. I've got to get the video finished. So I usually feel terrible after a very long grind, and I feel emotionally miserable because I'm
Right.
like, I can't believe I did that to myself. But usually that goes away once the video goes live, and I watch it live by premiering it on YouTube, and I see people reacting positively to it, and it's like, I'm happy this exists now. I'm proud of it.
Mhm.
Wait, so there's no breaks in between? Because me, I have to take like every couple hours, I have to just like do something. I just can't imagine that.
No, I have ADHD,
Okay.
and so it's hard for me to get into something, and when I am into something, it's impossible to drag me away from it because it's like, something in my lizard brain. All the wires have connected, and now this is my world. I am now an expert on what I'm doing and what I'm focused on. So, in order to kind of keep that momentum up, I push myself to not get away. That's unhealthy, and
Yeah.
I need to start training myself to take breaks. But yeah, that's kind of the unfortunate
Right.
work cycle that I put myself through.
I mean, I think it speaks to like a level of passion and enjoyment that I think most people in the world do not get out of their work, like
Yeah.
probably the far majority of people. And I think that's what makes content creation so interesting, because yeah, even if you feel the eye strain and the like muscle cramps, there's like you said, this part of your brain that's enjoying it, even if your body maybe
Yeah.
isn't so much.
Yeah, it's there's something like fun about it. When I was a kid, my parents got me, instead of like playing video games. I mean, this was back in the '90s when video games rot your brain was the popular narrative. So my parents never let me play video games until I was much older. But Legos were something that they got me hooked on, and by the time I reached like the age of maybe 11 or 10, I had moved on from Legos to building things out of cardboard and duct tape. Uh, and then from there, Minecraft started to become really popular in the 2000s. And so I kind of like moved over to building things in Minecraft, and drawing has been a big part of my life. And now kind of like the creative outlet for me is video editing. I do think I'm creating something. Like it's this whole song and dance that I'm putting on for you. It's this big spectacle. And yeah, so I do think it is a form of artistry making a video if you do put the time and effort into creating it.
Do you find that there's any technical limitations that limit your ability to create well in editing? Like, do you ever find your computer or the software to be getting in your way?
The software definitely. There's two big ones: Sony Vegas, or I guess Vegas now. They've kind of separated from Sony. Vegas Pro as well as Premiere. They're kind of the two big ones. And Vegas Pro is an unoptimized pile of shit, but it's a flat out price and you own it. Where Premiere is great, but it's a monthly subscription. I'd rather just own the thing so it's mine forever. So I don't use Premiere, and because of that, I have to put up with a lot of Vegas's nonsense.
Well, this would probably be a good time to talk about Davinci Resolve. Have you heard of it?
I have not heard of
It is-
DaVinci Resolve. I'm pulling it up right now.
It's becoming one of the most popular editors because it's a flat $300, because
Okay.
it's been an industry standard color grading software for over decades now, but they've introduced tons of features to make it a really powerful nonlinear editor, and it's GPU accelerated, so it's way smoother than Premiere. I was a
Okay.
Premiere editor for like 5 years, and now I've almost completely switched to Resolve because, one, I don't want to pay every month, and two, yeah, Premiere is just not a well-optimized piece of software, like, at all. It only uses your GPU for rendering. It doesn't really use it for any of the playback.
Okay.
But it's definitely something to check out. But at the same time, though, I feel like what's more important than the editor is like your familiarity with it. So obviously, if you feel good with Sony, then, or I guess, yeah, not Sony, just Vegas now, then that's probably the best place to stick.
Yeah.
That sounded a lot
Familiarity
like an ad read, Christian. You just did.
is-
Yeah, I'm gonna go cash my $50,000 check from DaVinci Resolve now. But I do actually feel like it is stuff worth talking about, though, because like I remember I used to get a lot of people who would ask me, like, because they knew I did some YouTube stuff, like, what editor do you recommend? And it's
Mhm.
really hard to recommend anyone to use Premiere Pro because most people flat out can't afford that. Like, even people who make money doing this stuff, it's a big chunk of your money that's now gone.
I can afford it, but with a subscription, now this is going to be me being a hypocrite because I do have some things that I'm subscribed to, but it's over time, I'm kind of thinking about like, all right, if I were to subscribe to Adobe Premiere and use it, what is it going to cost? What is it going to have cost like 5 months from now? Or not 5 months, 5 years. Like looking at the price tag starting to raise, it's like getting to the point where it's like, oh my god, I've spent thousands of dollars to use this thing.
Right.
I'd rather just give you some money so I can have it.
Like, I think that the big advantage of it is that you get all the software of Adobe and you get 24/7 customer support, which
Yeah.
from an experience I had this week, I can say is very good. Like, they really, like,
Yeah.
they'll remote into your computer, they'll get things figured out. But like, at the end of the day, though,
Adobe Premiere is so bad.
like I
It is
use
so bad.
I use the student discount, so it's not as much. But if I was paying full
Okay.
price, I just flat out wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah.
I just use the computers I just use Premiere at my school. I would never, because right now what I'm doing for my videos is I'm using Final Cut, and that's like, which I know some people are like, oh, Final Cut, but it's like you just pay $300 and then you never have to worry about it again.
Yeah.
And
That's not that bad. What are you talking about?
well, so from because when I went to college, well, I'm still in college, but when I first went into college, like that's everyone would just kind of like shit on me for it, and I was like, really, Final Cut? Because they were like, oh, it's Premiere and all this stuff, but like I'm so used to it at this point, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Like you know all the shortcuts. Like I'm sure, like with your editing, like all the shortcuts, the easiest way to do things, and you're so familiar with it. And the moment I tried to learn Premiere, it's like I was able to do it, but I'm not as proficient as I would be in Final Cut. So it's like, I don't know, trying to find a balance between those two.
Well, there's some stuff where it's definitely, if you're very ambitious and you want to do a lot of things, you do want to advance up the tool chain and get new things. But if you're very comfortable with what you're doing and you don't really need to increase your production value, like you're fine, you're comfortable with what you're creating, then you don't need to be bullied into advancing. Like stick with the tools that you know. So like for drawing and stuff, I actually still in the box, I have one of those pads for drawing on the computer, and I plugged it in and I was like, man, I don't want to deal with this nonsense. Like I know how to use a pencil on paper. I don't want to draw on a computer, so it's still in there. I wasted money on it. It's like, I'm okay with drawing on paper. I don't need to draw on a computer.
I mean, I think like, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting because when especially when we're talking about like YouTube and stuff like that, I always see people, especially when they're first starting out, they're always like thinking about equipment, and they think about buying the most expensive equipment and thinking that the most expensive equipment is going to get them success. And I see you shaking your head, so I know you probably strongly
Yeah.
disagree, which is good because we're on the same page here. But it's just interesting because people don't realize that it's like you can get a lot of stuff done with like, not saying it has to be like terrible equipment, but like relatively cheap equipment.
Yeah, it's very easy to feign high production value when you're editing something. That's one of the easiest things to do. It's not about the equipment you have, it's the talent that you have with editing,
Yeah, no, I
you
mean,
know?
I think that a lot of people, and I used to feel this way too, like use it as an excuse to not make things. But I feel like it's kind of like if you were, trying to become a professional writer, and this is kind of similar to what you were saying about the tablet. Like if you bought like a $300 mechanical keyboard, like, oh yeah, the typing experience would be amazing. It would be so like comfortable. But it's like if you don't have anything good to write, it doesn't matter at all. You could have written
Yeah.
the same thing with like a $20 membrane keyboard, and if there's nothing, if you have no ideas and no motivation, you're not going to get anything done. Just going to have a
Yeah.
bunch of expensive things sitting around that you spent all your money on.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think people
exactly.
like, I mean, and I also don't want to like understate the fact that like good gear can make things easier, but I think that a lot of
No.
people
Yeah.
are afraid of the effort that it will take regardless of what gear they have.
It's okay. I mean, this is going to be a very weird analogy because you should definitely grow out of training wheels, but
Yeah.
when it comes to creative stuff, if you're making beautiful things with what is essentially a tricycle or a piece of software that has training wheels, don't don't feel pressured to move beyond them. If you're making great things, like whatever, man, you've learned how to use the training wheels to your advantage.
Yeah.
Like it's okay when you do feel that you want to advance to the next stage, then go ahead. But yeah, training wheels are pretty cool sometimes. It narrows things down, makes things very simplistic. And sometimes that narrowing of the focus can actually help you be more creative than if you had just had a ton of things thrown at you all at once when you open a video editing software or music software or something.
I think it becomes like it becomes like an egotistical thing for people too, to like be able to feel better than someone because they use the more professional software. And the funny thing is with the whole Premiere argument is then there's Avid Media Composer, which is the actual professional one. And if you go on their website, their whole slogan is Avid editors make 90% more than Premiere editors. And then it's like
Yeah.
the Avid people are like, oh, Premiere, that's not even real software. It's
That's kind of
just
like
cringy, honestly.
so the Crisis video game franchise. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, I have.
I haven't.
Crisis was a very ahead of its time video game, not for gameplay, but for graphical reasons. Essentially, in 2007, Crytek, the company, released a video game that was about a decade ahead of everybody. In fact, it was a meme online that nobody could run Crisis because they released a game that was just way too ahead of its time. And it took a very long time for other video games to just catch up graphically because of just how impressive it was, what it was doing. And with that video game, this relates to what you were just saying, Christian. The video game, when you opened up its graphics options menu, the lowest setting possible was just minimum. And then it was like after minimum graphic settings, it was like hobbyist or something. And then it was like gamer as the middle tier. And then it was like expert. And then it was like it it belittled you for playing on minimum settings. And that's kind of like the whole approach to that game. It was like, unless you were running the most expensive computer possible and running that game at the highest setting, you were just minimum,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of curious now. when you first started, I would imagine there's a difference between the equipment you were using then and now, but how much has that changed? Like just like the stuff that you're using to create your videos.
It's not changed that much. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
I got myself a new microphone, but that's about it. I've been using Vegas Pro 13 for half a decade now.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't changed it. In fact, probably, but aside from this microphone, just because I was like, I want to make my videos look sexy, I bought myself a $150 per object motion blur simulation.
Mhm.
Just so I could put that on some videos if I wanted them to look a little bit spicier. Yeah, I'm comfortable with what I have.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, as someone who spent like a lot of my like money on gear, like I mean, I think it's different to an extent because like I'm just kind of a nerd about gear, but like people who do that because they think that that will be what makes them successful, it does make me sad because like I think that it's, again, this feeling like maybe that if you spend more you'd have to work less, but it's going to come down to like time, effort, creativity, and a willingness to continually fail, as in fail as in like not be famous immediately,
Yeah,
unless of course the algorithm pulls some kind of miracle. But I don't think
it
that's
is.
actually good for someone's mental health, to be honest, but that could probably be a different discussion.
It's okay to fail at certain things. In fact, it's something I would probably actively encourage. And don't think of it as like a failure. You kind of bookmark that mentally as like, okay, now I know what not to do next time. In fact, going through my history of YouTube videos, you can see the way that a lot of my YouTube thumbnails started out, and they were just like this unreadable mess. I was using dark images with dark text. You couldn't actually make it out. It was just a blurry smudge of brown and purple. And over time of just constantly screwing up my thumbnails, I finally learned how to do them right. And I found a formula that's readable and really good.
How long before, because I know like every YouTuber, I mean, most people, they don't have like that instant success. How long, like, how long was it before you actually were able to start gaining traction on your channel? Like, I imagine there was some period where like you weren't really getting many people actually watching your stuff.
Um, it was it was a video. It's now currently one of my most viewed videos. I uploaded it in 2016, and it's embarrassing because I don't look back upon it very fondly. But it was just kind of a moment where I felt very heated. I felt very angry and passionate about a topic, and I put my all into the video. And it definitely does come across, even if like I wasn't great at articulating how I was feeling. There's definitely an emotional energy to that video, and that video blew up out of nowhere. And so after that, I was like, all right, I'm gonna chisel away at this, cut out a lot of the rough edges, sand it down, smooth it, and get to something that I am comfortable with. And ever since that video, I'm still chiseling, I'm still sanding it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you feel like, or I guess how did it feel initially when you started getting like tons of comments every day, which I imagine were a mix of positive and negative?
It was definitely something. Definitely a you can kind of get lost in a certain mentality, which is just like social media in general. The human brain was not designed to be so interconnected at all times, so you can kind of get trapped in a well of thought. Um, but it's it's kind of like it is definitely interesting, because at first I didn't handle it very well, like the constant stream of comments and stuff, and it would kind of like infect my mood away from YouTube and stuff. You just see a couple negative comments and you'd see that as kind of like the big ones while ignoring a lot of the positive ones. um, a way to kind of get yourself out of that mindset of focusing way too much on those negative comments is uh, start ignoring them and start interacting with the positive comments. You know,
Mm-hmm.
an instinct is to defend yourself, and I mean, I still need to catch myself on social media to this day, so it's definitely not like a flawless thing you can just do. But stop interacting with them and start interacting with the positive comments.
I kind of I cut out, but I did kind of come in at that very interesting point that you just made, because I see this all the time with like smaller YouTubers, especially is they will, especially when like you're really small, they're not responding to all their comments, but the second they get something negative, they have to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And
it's good that you have like that instinct. That means you take pride in what you've done. But don't only respond to the negative comments, because it's going to train your brain to assume that a lot of it is negativity, a lot of the feedback you're getting, because you're commenting and typing in response to negative things, so you start to associate comments with negative things.
And also, like, I've seen that, you know, your audience, especially if you're not responding to them, especially when you're smaller and you're not giving them the, like, if they're taking the time of day to actually, and I understand, like, once you get bigger, it's hard to obviously respond to every single comment. Like, I don't expect bigger YouTubers to do that. But when you're smaller and people are actually watching your stuff, the least you can do is, you know, interact with them or say something back. Or they even have that, like, heart feature now. Like, that's so easy. All you got to do is, like, look, I acknowledged what you're saying. And I you know, I found myself with like the negativity. I would respond to it, and then I'm like, well, this is what they want. They want me to get heated. They want me to, you know, and if it's constructive criticism, that's fine. But we all know that doesn't happen too much on YouTube anyway. It's usually, you know, it's usually just people trying to make you feel bad about yourself or whatever. And I've debated, well, should I like kind of, because sometimes I'll get like mean comments and I'll say like a joke back, and I'm like, is that even worth it at this point? Like even interacting with them or even clapping back, however you want to phrase it. So,
well, and sometimes it is genuinely constructive comment, but the person typing it doesn't have a lot of experience, so it does come across as a bit mean-spirited. It's kind of like you need to, and obviously it's not a flawless thing. I'm not a saint. I still even struggle with this, but I'm trying to teach myself, like, sometimes you got to kind of swallow your pride, swallow your ego a little bit, and you've got to take it as an attempt at constructive criticism and ask, like, you know, a person can say that you're awful and terrible, quit, delete your YouTube, and then, you know, just swallow that pride and ask them, what can I change? You know, what would you do to improve?
Did you initially find yourself defensive over your content, like, to a degree where someone was giving you constructive criticism and you got defensive? Like, was that ever an experience you had?
Oh yeah. And I mean, it still happens, you know. I still struggle with it. It's an ongoing project, a self project that I'm working on, trying to get myself to the point where I can do that reflexively.
Well, I think when we put so many hours into something, like, it's so easy to just identify with it and make it us. And the minute someone criticizes it, they've criticized us as a person. And
I spend 11 hours making a video, and then someone just responds with, "This was shit," and it's just like, wow, you know, and you just lose your mind, because it's like, I poured my heart and soul into this.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, I have also find it like kind of sad when you do find like a really large creator who does do that, like blow up at someone in the comments for criticizing them. Like, I've seen it happen, and it even like people who are like in their 40s and stuff. And I guess it just shows me that, like, if we don't learn how to deal with this, you know, initially, it's just going to always be a problem, like the getting defensive, because it's like, it's natural. Like, we put in the work, we think it's good, and someone just comes and's mean about it and is hurtful, but like, it's more obviously a reflection of them than anything else.
Well, and even not them, because we can't judge their motivations. We can only assume based on their writing. Like I said, for them, they might be honestly trying to do constructive criticism, but they're not very experienced with it, so it came off as an insult, when really that's just kind of how they talk.
I think I maybe misspoke there. I meant more the difference between someone just insulting you versus being Well, you're right. There could be an insult with criticism, at which point you should, like you said, be like, okay, I'm not going to take this personally, but maybe there's something I could fix, versus like insult. Like, when the whole comment is that, I do think that's them. But you're right. If the comment has like a mix, then it's inarticulate person who maybe does have a point.
Yeah, that's not to say that every negative comment you should take as an attempt at constructive criticism, because there is just nonsense sometimes that you can just ignore and disregard.
Right. Especially if you
Well,
click on their profile and they have like neo-Nazi videos.
Yeah.
Might be a good sign.
I haven't had that experience, but when you see something that's like, this is shit, it's like, well, what are you supposed to take away from that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you, you just kind of, now if they say this is shit because, I mean, that's kind of a mean way of going about it, but then you're actually able to, because I probably improved. I mean, just reflecting on personal experience here, I probably improved my video quality in general just by reading the comments. They're like, oh, your lighting looks,
Yeah.
it's way too yellow or whatever. And so like now, like where I am now, it's like I'm actually actively reading it and seeing what people are saying, and most of it's supportive. But then you'll get some like stuff that'll actually, because if you look at the stuff I was doing when I was 13 to now when I'm 20, it's like a lot of the changes I've made is because of a comment that I've gotten.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to swallow for sure. Like sometimes they're like, oh, you need to. I think I remember I got a comment saying something like, you need to like try something different, like the shtick that you're doing or whatever. It's not working, and that was hard for me to swallow. Then I was like, well, what can I kind of change? Like, what can I work with?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it is gonna sting when you get like something that you kind of know it's right, even
Yeah.
though your instinct is to defend yourself, and that's also something that is okay to acknowledge. Obviously, like we've got lizard brains, like we can't fight against how we're trained to respond to something, but we can kind of nudge ourselves in a better direction going forward. When you feel the need to defend yourself from a negative comment, at least acknowledge in the back of your brain that you're like 20% of myself knows that that guy was kind of right. But the other 80%, I'm going to be mad. Like, it's okay. Let the 80% of yourself be mad as long as you know that that 20% of yourself understands the criticism.
Right. No, I think it's, yeah. So like fine line, I guess, is like the advice for people. Like you have to figure out. Yeah, I guess like anything, it's complicated. There's not like one answer to it. But I guess
Yeah.
for anyone starting off, it's just like every situation is unique, and you can't just, I guess, have like a blanket statement of how to deal with comments.
Yeah.
And with that
Yeah.
being said, like, do you find that there's been times where the overwhelming amount of positive feedback you've gotten has led to like feelings of pride or like almost too positive of feelings? Because like I think there's something to be said for like, I don't really know how well most people do when they start dealing with incredible amounts of positive feedback. Like I have a feeling it can be unhealthy, but I don't know because I haven't personally dealt with that. But I just imagine it seems like it's something you have to navigate carefully, like just dealing with not letting that define you either, like everyone telling you you're great all day long.
Yeah, there does still need to be like a little bit of humility involved, because it can definitely get to your head.
Right. Was that something that you had like dealt with in the beginning, like having to like sort of process that, versus now like maybe it's less significant because you've been getting a lot of positive comments for so long? And I don't mean less significant like it doesn't mean anything, but like I'm not gonna like let this define me as a person kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Some of my heated moments where I get a little bit too aggressive about a certain topic and stuff, usually it doesn't come from a point of pride. It's almost the opposite. It's a point of insecurity and a desperation for you to understand, like validating some of my own opinions. But there are a couple of moments where you kind of get lost in your own ego and you're king shit for the day, basically, and you're just kind of like an asshole. And it definitely requires like a person to kind of give you that knock on the head to kind of break through that red haze of ego, for you to kind of be like, oh, that wasn't cool what I did.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's, I guess we're only human, like the lizard brain thing you've been saying. Like I'm just still curious to see how people will respond to social media fame, like on different levels for everybody. But like Eric and I have talked about this with TikTok. Like when you see little kids who become famous, like in the period of like, you know, famous in the period of a few days, like I don't know
Yeah,
what
they
that
go
does to a
completely
kid.
mental.
Right. Like if you're like 12 and all of a sudden you have like hundreds of thousands of people following you.
Yeah. When you're young, I say young, like we're not young. When you're a teenager, I should say, your body is going through a lot of hormonal and physical changes, and that does influence your thought process. Your personality can rapidly change over the course of just a few years. So when you become really popular, that will influence you as you're aging. And it can lead to some negative personality traits forming that unfortunately become kind of like semi-permanent parts of your brain as an adult. So there is definitely a lot of worry about, yeah, kind of blowing up when you're young.
Right.
And I mean, I'm 24, so my YouTube channel started to kind of grow when I was 19. So I was definitely kind of at the tail end of that teenage experience. But yeah, I look back at some videos and I'm just like, wow, I'm a really different person.
Right.
I feel like I don't agree at all with what 19-year-old me was saying.
Yeah, that's it's super interesting. Like as YouTubers, we have like our whole like life sort of just on display for us to go back and look at, or for anyone to do so if they so choose. Like obviously we only show so much to the camera, but I think there's also a lot more that we express about ourselves even if we do it unconsciously.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, like I guess it'll be interesting when we're like old, like in our 70s, if we make it that far, like looking back at like this time of like, wow, I had my young self on the internet. Like, I mean, I imagine
Yeah.
it'll still be in some variant at that time, but I just wonder how like old fashioned this kind of stuff will look. And if we'll be
Yeah,
showing our grandkids, you know, like, oh, this was your grandpa when he was a kid. He was a big YouTube star. Like, they're like, what is YouTube? You know?
yeah, whatever YouTube's going to be in the future. Yeah, it's interesting as well because we're about a decade away from what I would call kind of like the end of the new frontier for the internet. Like the 2000s were the internet was the Wild West, the new frontier. Everyone was still trying to figure out what the internet was. And now things have started to settle into place, and looking at like the evolution of internet memes. I mean, memes before we even knew that that's what they were called. Like looking at troll face.
Yeah.
And then you're just like thinking now, and the thing that you just lose your mind laughing at is a picture of Thanos that's been hyper saturated. Like, you know.
Isn't that weird that like I still don't understand like I love memes obviously like everyone, but isn't it weird that
Don't
that's
say that. Don't say that. Don't say I love memes.
I know that's kind of a normie thing to
That's
say.
the worst thing you can say.
Yeah, but this is what I mean by that. It's like when you look at them, they don't make any sense.
They don't.
But yet they still generate this response.
It's a celebration of nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some of like the reason that I laugh when I look at it. There's this famous quote. I think it was Roger Ebert who said it in response to I think it's, I don't want to say Max Brooks. That's the guy who wrote the Zombie Survival Guide. Oh God, yeah, his dad was like a comedian filmmaker. He made Blazing Saddles and stuff. But a famous Roger Ebert quote is, "It's the kind of movie that you laugh at twice. You laugh at the movie because of how absurd it is, and then you laugh at yourself for laughing at something so dumb and beneath you." And that's kind of what a meme is. You're just like, I can't believe how intolerably low effort this joke was. And then you're laughing at yourself for sinking down to that level and laughing. Like I said, just a picture of Thanos that's hyper saturated.
You know,
you just lose your mind laughing.
I still haven't seen that movie, which I feel like makes me like, unqualified to understand anything on the internet that has to do with memes now, because like
Uh-huh.
I think I told you this. I've only seen like a handful of Marvel movies,
Hmm.
but I have Disney Plus now, so maybe it's a good time to just go through them all. um
The Marvel movies are pretty good. I they're not like masterpieces and stuff. I think, I mean, aesthetically they're very impressive looking, but they're a good watch.
right, right. I mean, and I guess like on this whole topic of internet communication, it's just interesting to see how this quarantine, in the context of what is going on in the world, which we don't want to get demonetized for saying, um, how that has really, like, I would say, like, I'm trying to accelerated our need to use the internet and like dependency on it and having it be our daily life all online. Like, at least for me now, like my job is remote. I'm on the computer all day. My eyes hurt. But it's like, it's still amazing though that we can do that, that we can interact with everything around us through a computer and through something like that. Like, I don't know. Like, it's
Yeah.
still fascinating to me. And I wonder if this quarantine situation will accelerate our dependency on that as people.
It probably will. I do think work from home has kind of opened the door on an interesting topic that companies can now have. Obviously, working in a building, being right next door to some of your coworkers, like work can get done much faster that way. But for like emotional well-being, I do think that when the situation has been dealt with, when we've got vaccines and stuff, and it's quieted down a little bit, I do think it's worth having a discussion just for workers' well-being if working from home could be an honest strategy for some people.
As in, that would make it better or worse to work from home?
Better.
Because I
Like,
personally, I've found that my mental health situation has deteriorated as a result of working from home. But I think
yeah,
it's like a personality to personality thing.
yeah, people have different personalities. We're not all the same human being. For some people, going to work just completely drains them and makes them feel miserable, and they actually feel like they're thriving creatively by working from home. You hear
Mm-hmm.
stories about that right now.
Hmm.
I personally am one of those people where I'm like, you know what? I think I'd rather go to a physical location to work. But there are some people where they feel more comfortable working from home. They feel more creative, like they can get more done. And I do think that's worth a discussion worth having in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess depends on the job, depends on the person. It would be interesting if it was an option. I would be
Yeah.
supportive of that.
Yeah,
But
as an option, it should be an option.
because, like, for me, it's just more the situation where I just don't talk to anybody except now, like,
Yep.
online. And I still think
Yep.
it's different. I don't think video chat's the same. Like, it doesn't feel to me
It's
like
not.
sitting next to someone.
It's not. You get kind of like trapped in a prison of the self. Uh, I found, that honest to God, there are some days where I wake up and I go throughout the whole day and I've probably spoken out loud, maybe just 3 paragraphs.
Right.
If you combine everything that I've said over the course of the day, like we do still need some of that social interaction
Yeah.
because otherwise we just kind of like lose our ability to engage with another person physically.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I guess well, I kind of wanted to touch on this before the podcast ends because this has really just been this was something when I was doing research because occasionally I actually do research for these things, believe it or not.
Okay.
And yeah, I know it's crazy. And I saw you had gone to Outpost Discovery, and I'm very curious about. Obviously, I watched the video, I saw your experience, but I want to know what it's like when you're creating content, obviously about Halo, and then you're there, and you're meeting developers and all that stuff. What was that experience like for you?
It was definitely kind of surreal. In fact, I kind of didn't process it until after I had left.
Hmm.
But meeting developers is one thing. Like, in fact, they're my friends at this point. So
Really?
seeing other people reacting, so like, oh my gosh, you work on the video game that I like. That was interesting because I have a personal relationship with some of these people. But it's interesting because I mean, I'm me.
Mhm.
I remember playing outside on that tree right outside my window. Like I'm a guy. I grew up, and so seeing people genuinely in shock that they were meeting me was really interesting because it's just like I'm a person though. Like I'm not a celebrity, you know?
Right.
But other people do consider me that. And it's just kind of like this interesting, I don't want to say disconnect, but yeah, I don't know. It's a humbling experience to see like, oh my God, people think about me like that.
Mhm.
That's not something that I want to take for granted.
Well, they were what I thought was really interesting is that you said how people were recognizing you just because of your voice, which
Yeah.
is something that was just like, I could not imagine that. Like, you're just having a conversation with someone, and they're like, wait a minute, you know? So
Yeah.
was that something that happened a lot? Is like, that's where they would, because at that point, had you shown your face at all, or was it something that you didn't really, show that
It's
much?
it's not a thing I actively do, but like,
Okay.
there are pictures of me online. But I'd wager most people don't know what I look like.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So they know me via my voice. So when I'm speaking to somebody, I see a couple people break away from lines so that they can come talk to me.
There's a musical artist named Justin Vernon who I really
Uh-huh.
really like a lot. His band is called Bon Iver, and he in the past couple of years went into a deep depression because of how well known he had become. He felt like he couldn't deal with it at all. He didn't, that was at least a big reason. He didn't like the fact that he had now become a celebrity, and he got really into drinking and just really like not in a good place for years. But then he came out of it with this like acceptance of the fact that he was an icon now to all these people. And instead of letting it be something that would bring him down, he chose to like accept it, and then I guess like be a leader to those people, if that makes sense. Because I went and saw him live, and he was kind of talking about that on stage and like in interviews. Like I accept where I'm at now. This is what it is, and I'm just going to roll with it. And I'm gonna try to do something good with this power and fame that I have, which obviously a little different than YouTube, but like the larger scale
Yeah.
of someone who's now become really famous and who was just obviously like all of us, just a person. So I think it's interesting, like how people deal with that. And I guess this idea that like acceptance is kind of all we really can do in life when it's things like that, you know?
Yeah. Something that definitely helps me with some of those things, because sometimes it's hard to separate late night gaming from Taras the person. Like I feel like I can't like I'm the YouTube logo. Like that's what I am. I'm my little icon on my YouTube channel. And it's hard to kind of like detach myself. And sometimes what I do to ground myself back in Taras is I just immerse myself in something from my childhood. I get out an old video game or find an old movie that I used to like as a kid, or even go on walks in the woods that I used to play in and try to see if maybe I could find like old relics of, like maybe pieces of a toy gun or something. Like just from my childhood. It's like just allow yourself to retreat back to a simpler time. Be
Mm-hmm.
nostalgic, like revel in it.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that kind of weighs on you a lot, like knowing that I guess your words have power, that kind of thing? Like,
Yeah.
is it
Yeah,
is it? I
definitely.
mean, like, do you get anxious about that, or is it more of just kind of like I don't know? How do you describe that feeling?
No, yeah, it's the best way I can describe it actually is it's like imagine if your life was being graded. You know, you're not just like taking a test and turning it into the teacher. Imagine if the steps that you take to your teacher to give her or him the test, like that's being graded, the way your breathing is being graded. It's that same anxiety of your work being graded, but it's your life. Um, and definitely sometimes what does help is you just got to remember like you've got to be the one to initiate the online engagement. Like people aren't following you and grading you through the computer. If I want to, I can leave my phone right here and just go for a walk outside and I'm me and nobody knows what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it It is okay to do that. And it's also okay to be anxious about that because we do find enjoyment online. I'm a big Reddit browser. I enjoy watching YouTube stuff, but it, yeah, it's okay to disconnect for a little while. You have that power.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's this whole podcast, like doing this with people has been really interesting for me because like I think these are like the burning questions a lot of people have who are like,
Yeah.
watching YouTube, creating YouTube, like, what does it mean when you blow up? Like, how's it going to feel? Like,
And we've all got different personalities. So my
Right.
views on all these exact same questions are going to be different from somebody else that you talk to, and ask them the same questions. And it would be interesting to see how their answers differ.
Right. No, and I guess also just like the fact that we live in this time now where there are a lot of people who want to get into being an influencer to be famous. Like that is their motivation. And I've talked to people like that. And I'm not trying to judge them. Like I'm just saying like genuinely like known people are like, what am I going to do when I get famous? What am I going to do when I blow up? Like, how am I going to walk down the streets anymore? Like, just like that I do think we live in a time where social media has kind of fueled a lot of people's egos. Yeah, like I don't want to say narcissism because it sounds kind of extreme, but like
Narcissism. There's a lot of narcissism.
But I don't think it's necessarily the people are like extra bad people. I think there's just a lot of pressures in society that kind of allow you to give into that.
There's a lot of social media. So Call of Duty, this is going to be another video game thing. The Call of Duty franchise does this very subtle but clever trick, and it's part of what makes it so addictive. So whenever you land a shot on an enemy, you hear this little sound, this like sound, and it's every time you land a shot on somebody. So as you're firing your machine gun, you've got these rapid sound effects. And with social media, I think of Twitter. Whenever you swipe down your notifications thing and you hear that like pop sound effect and all those new notifications are there, you're being trained to engage with social media in a very specific way, and associate like some of these things with positivity, even if it is negative. So if you're in a heated argument with somebody and you're, I can't wait for their response to a thing, and you're flipping down and you hear that pop and there's their response to you, it's like a dog. You're being trained to seek out that sound effect, to seek out those engagements online. And it does do unhealthy things to people and the way that they engage with each other.
So you can get your data sold by these companies because
Yeah.
that's why they want you on there longer, right? If I understand, like advertisements are part of it. Mostly it's like your data is worth a lot.
You see a lot of people on Facebook, whenever Facebook does something bad and stupid that they should feel bad and stupid about, you see all these people like, how could they screw us this way? We're their customers. And it's like, no, you're not. You're using Facebook for free. Their customers are the people placing ads, or the people buying your information. They're the customers. Yeah. That's why Facebook is doing the things they're doing that don't benefit you. It's because you're not the customer.
But they're committed to security and privacy more than ever.
Yeah, right. Whatever their excuse is.
But, and that's something I don't want to get too into because I'm not like the kind of person who really can wrap my head around that whole, like, I guess, conundrum. I don't know. But, like, it's some part of it doesn't sit well with me to the point where I just started trying to use Mozilla Firefox instead of Chrome today. So, but who knows? I think that it's out there. The data's out there. I don't know. I love social media. I also kind of hate it. But I think that's just where we're at with the world,
I like the benefits of social media, and I hate the cons of social media. I hate it so much. It's a pity that there are benefits.
Yeah, no, I just have no idea where it's going. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah.
But
we gotta ride it out. Going back to the discussion about how memes have evolved from the troll face to a saturated picture of Thanos. Like, it's gonna evolve. I can't wait I dread to see what the internet's gonna be a decade from now.
Yeah. Well, it's probably
we're just gonna be responding to each other with numbers.
I don't.
Or
'cause,
images.
Yeah, like I
Or the
don't.
color blue.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a pretty good place to leave it. So, to those of you guys who listened, who watched, this has been a riveting conversation, I think, and hopefully it made some sense. But anyway,
It did.
until next
It
time,
did. I'm pretty confident in that.
I think it did as well. Well, Taras, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you
Yeah,
guys who
absolutely.
were listening, you can find links to his YouTube and Twitter in the description. And this has been the Buffering Podcast.